also extend the value of business intelligence through advanced analytics. I want to talk just a few moments about those advanced analytics. There's lots of different analytics that are now available through business intelligence. And what happens, if you look at a graph like this, there's a definite spread between the complexity and the value to the business in terms of these different applications I'm going to talk about. At the bottom, which it's the least complex to build, but it also has the lowest business value, are really reporting. It's things that we would consider hard copy reports that we're just running from a data warehouse. Above that, what we have is analysis. And this answers really questions of why did it happen. So reporting kind of answers, okay, here's what happened. Here's your report. Analysis is, well, why did it happen? On top of that, or a little more complex, we have something that's called monitoring, which is what's happening now. So this is my dashboard or my scorecard that allows me to be able to see what's going on in my business. A little bit more complex than that, we have forecasting, which would tell us what might happen. Above that, we have predictive analytics, which is what is likely to happen. And above that is prescriptive analytics, which is what actions should be taken in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit more about these in depth because sometimes the nuances are lost and people use these terms interchangeably. Down here we have a discipline that's really considered to be descriptive statistics. And this would be averages and totals and things like that. That's what the type of information that we use down here. Over here, what we're doing is we're trying to answer quantity questions. And I'll give you a little example in just a moment. Here, we're trying to answer behavioral questions, like who are my best customers, where do they live, what's their most likely purchase. And finally, when you talk about prescriptive analytics, you're doing simulation modeling and you're trying to come up with optimal outcome questions. All of these types of analytics are available within BI. But let's take a real simple example, and let's say that we own a bunch of ice cream stores and ice cream carts, and we're trying to figure out how best to run the business. So what's really happening at each level? In terms of reporting, we would have financial data that says, here's how much we sold at each one of the stores, each one of our ice cream vendor stores last month. We would use analysis to try to figure out how much did we sell today. So, excuse me, what we would try to do over here with the analysis is, why are we selling what we're selling? So how much is each store selling, what's going on. Monitoring really talks about what happened today. So we could put a dashboard together to say, how did each store perform today? When we move to regression, what we're really looking at for forecasting is, well, how much do we think we're going to sell this summer? And to answer questions like, how much milk should I order? When you get to predictive analytics, the type of questions you're trying to answer really is, who are my best customers? Are they parents with kids? What flavors would be most popular? Is it going to be mocha or is it going to be vanilla, chocolate? What's the most popular flavor based upon the customers that I have? And that's called behavioral analytics. And prescriptive analytics would talk about adding additional data sets to be able to look at things like, if we have a cold summer, what action should we take in terms of hiring, for instance, because we anticipate that we're going to sell less ice cream. So there are different types of analytics that can be used. Each one of these analytics becomes more and more complex depending on because they require more data and more human intelligence to make the determinations. Companies who have implemented predictive analytics, 2/3 of them say that it adds value to their business. On average, it's cost clients $1.36 million to implement predictive analytics, and there's an annual support cost of somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million per year to keep those analytics running. It's a combination of the cost of collecting the data, the analytic tools to do the analysis, but most importantly, the largest cost are the data analysts and the data scientists who actually are the ones who are interpreting this data. What we've found in these studies is that the more you pay, the higher value you perceive you're getting from your analytics. So having a big team of PhD data scientists will probably give you better results. But that's usually not something that all companies can afford. That's great for the Fortune 1000 companies. Most of us probably work for smaller companies than that. So what I'd like to do is to just talk a little bit about that and a couple other things here. Some of the applications that the people use predictive analytics for are shown here on this particular slide. And they're pretty much split 50-50 between the behavioral analytics and the point forecast type analytics. So something like cross-sell and upsell is definitely a behavioral or predictive analytics. Something like a budget or a forecast obviously is a forecasting application. There's a very important concept to remember, which is something that talks about correlation versus causation. The reason I want to talk about this is that predictive analytics, and as Mike mentioned, my background is as an economist, so I really love all of this stuff, but it can be very misleading, and in many cases, companies can still benefit from the concepts of predictive analytics without actually having to have a huge team of data scientists doing the work. And the first real important factor here is to understand the difference between if something is correlated or if it's causing it. And here's a graph that shows the number of pirates from 1820 through 2000 versus the global average temperature of the ocean. And from this, what I could draw some conclusions, and one is that if I wanted to decrease global warming, then what I would really need to do is to increase the number of pirates that are on the seas. And we could very well control global warming that way. Or if we eliminated the remaining pirates that are available, that are on the seas right now, we could potentially cause the oceans to warm and the glaciers to melt, and this could lead to coastal flooding all over the world. And as absurd as that seems, and the reason I put this example out there is that these things have a high correlation, but they don't cause each other. So the number of pirates does not necessarily cause global warming. And the difficulty with using statistics is that most of these analytics are so easy to use within tools that you can end up very easily creating predictions that may not really be useful for you to drive your business. So let's pretend that this series here is your sales for all these ice cream stores over the last 6 months, and just by looking at it, it looks like it's trending upward. And if we do a regression analysis on it, and then we do some forecasting, our sales would look something like this, and we would say, great, based upon our historic pattern of sales, it looks like we are going to continue to increase, and our sales are going to go up for the next 6 months. But this is what the other part of the data series looks like. So the data comes in for the next 6 months, and you can see that if we had used the red forecast line, that we may have made some serious mistakes when it came to decisions about where we were going to end the year, how we should do staffing and hiring, etc. If we drew a new line through this using regression analysis or math, what would end up happening is we'd have a slightly decreasing series, and you can draw a completely different conclusion about how your business is running. What's really happened here, though, is that there's an anomaly that occurred over here. Something happened that made sales drop. This could be seasonality. It could be the fact that the Olympics were in town during this period and they left, and so you have much less sales over here. It could be a whole bunch of different things. But what you want to look for when you're doing these forecasts, and again, this is the ability to use leading indicators, really, to talk about how to predict the future. That's what I'd like you to take away from this, is that there are some bad metrics that you can use when you're doing forecasts. So, for instance, knowing what the sales were last week or last month is really not a good indicator of what they're going to be next week or next month. If your company is one that puts out proposals, the number of proposals aren't necessarily a good metric for measuring how many sales you might have, because very easily what can happen is that your salespeople are told, we need more proposals, and they just start sending them out. Well, that doesn't mean they're necessarily qualified or they're going to turn into business. Or a metric like the number of meetings set, for instance. That too can become very irrelevant, because it's very easy to set a meeting with somebody who may not necessarily be somebody ready to purchase your product. So finding leading indicators that are really driving your sales numbers, for instance, is really what's key when you're looking at BI. And this can really be done without necessarily a big team of data scientists. A leading indicator to sales might be something like qualified meetings per week. So what we're looking at is we have some way of identifying which ones are actually qualified, and we know that if we have 5 qualified meetings per week, that within 3 months 40% of those will close, and within 6 months 60% of those will close. If we had that information, we could now start using that for a forecast, and we could start to have an indicator or a KPI that could be immediately actionable. So if I saw that the number of qualified leads, or qualified meetings rather, has fallen, like we only got 2 this week, I could immediately take some type of action to try to get my salespeople to get more qualified meetings next week to make up for that. And if they're unable to do that, I would then be able to forecast out what my numbers would look like in March or April, and I'd be able to make adjustments today based upon what I believe my new sales numbers are going to be. Another leading indicator that you might use is something like speaking engagements or webinars. These generate business. If you know that from each speaking engagement that maybe someone on your executive team or your sales team makes, that you normally generate 3 leads, well, that's, again, the number of speaking engagements that you make has a direct correlation with the amount of sales that you're going to have. And again, you can look at things like qualified prospects in the pipe too. And this isn't just names in the pipeline, these are actually qualified using some type of criteria. Again, the important part about using statistics is really the ability to understand what is driving the series and not where the series is going. So I'd like to give you 3 practical tips for designing KPIs, and then I'll be handing it back over to Michael. The first one is that all things vary. And when you look at the data, it usually looks like things are going up in a seemingly erratic fashion. And it's the complexity and the interaction of a lot of these causal factors. There are externalities that you don't have any control over that can influence your sale, whether it's your competition changing prices or opening more stores or launching a new product, the economy, the unemployment rate, what the weather is. There's all sorts of externalities. There's internal factors too, like how much money is spent on marketing, messaging, productivity, etc., the quality of your product. Some of these things are controllable, but everything varies. And understanding what varies and how that affects your overall sales is what's really important. So understanding the root cause is going to help you design a KPI that allows you to see whether things are going up or down and then what to do about them. Second thing is, because things vary, there's always uncertainty. So we really can't know anything with 100% certainty, and that's the whole science of statistics. It's not mathematics. Mathematics always gives us a point. So you add 2 things together, it gives us a number. Statistics is really the study of uncertainty so that we can start looking at patterns within the data. The further out you go, the less sure you are about what those numbers are, because the variation becomes bigger. So understanding this, you never rely 100% on forecast or predictives that somebody might give you. Instead, they should be used really to help guide you in terms of the decisions that you make. And the third thing is that the key to knowing something is to really find and measure the uncertainty. And those are the signals that really need to stand out. And it's very difficult when you're looking at data series to see what exactly is happening. We can tell exactly what we sold last month. We can only estimate what we might sell next month. So that variation is fundamental to statistics. The knowledge comes from these patterns and trends. And I would argue that I could put all sorts of mathematical models against the ice cream data, and I may never know the actual true reason that I sell more or less ice cream. And it's the human intelligence, if you look at those patterns, where you can say, you know what, actually, I think there's a correlation between every time this museum runs a kids get in free day, my ice cream sales double at my ice cream stand near that museum. Well, that probably isn't in your database. That's something that human intelligence has to actually see or interpret from that data. So looking at the data series, try to understand where you have these signals, where you have these anomalies, and try to collaborate about those and understand what you need to do to move your business forward. With that, I'd like to hand it back over to Mike.
Hey, thanks, Ray. I actually wanted, I'm always intrigued with the information that's in here when we've discussed it in the past. A couple of general, for commentary purposes or discussion purposes, and certainly a welcome input from the audience on some of this, not only what we've talked about so far, but some of the discussion points as well. When I look at it, I am not a mathematician and I'm not a statistician, but I've definitely got a number of years in business and in senior management. It's always struck me that there's a big difference between actually capturing the data, but not necessarily the intelligence and the expertise, or to use an accounting term, there's a lot of off-book knowledge that is part of making fundamental good use of the data that's captured. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Oh, I think that's a very fair statement, and I think that it goes back to the slide where I showed the subject matter experts and the CEOs, et cetera, adding human intelligence to the data. It speaks very much towards that. So what the important thing to do there is somebody within the company who probably understands why things are happening the way they are, whether or not there was some machinery that was broken down and wasn't able to, for instance, produce the ice cream during last summer, and so that data looks much lower than it historically should be. There's all this human intelligence that's floating around. Now, capturing that and being able to tie that to that KPI in terms of a conversation string, and then being able to go back later and analyze why things happen, and having all of that subject matter expertise captured is really how you start to really leverage human intelligence within a company.
Yeah, and it speaks, I think, as well to what I think of as a build process. I was thinking back to the slide that you had that talked about the different portions, so the reporting, and then the analytics, and then all the way up to the top to the predictive analytics.
Right.
You need fundamental information at the bottom, but that's just data. And as you move higher up the chain towards the predictive side, each step up that you take implies there's more human information that needs to be applied to it to make sense of it. And also, if you're not capturing that, if there's not some way to be able to think of it as a wheel that's turning as you're going through these cycles, and fine-tune the assumptions and the predictions and the methodology that you're using to turn the data into actionable information and into paths for the organization, you really need to do that. And that's the human intelligence side, like you spoke about. Data is just data.
Exactly, and I have actually just wrote a blog entry on that, which is data is dumb, because there's no value in the data. It's the ability to interpret the data, and what's happened and what's created our ability to have this continuum. And I put the slide back up. If you go back 100 years, reporting would have been green bar ledger. I guess not even that far ago, huh? but it would have been just these green bar reports that you would have come up with. It is really the advent of the immense computing power and and how cheap it really is to run these models that have allowed us to make this this type of analytics really available to the mainstream. So you're absolutely right. With every level as we go up, there's more human intelligence that's required to interpret what the data is, and it's the advent of cheap computing that's allowed us to do this. So forecasting is not a big deal. You can do that in Excel. Predictive analytics, though, because forecasting ends up with a point as a result. Predictive analytics, though, who are my best customers? That starts to require human intelligence to start clustering together your customers and trying to understand their characteristics. And then with simulation modeling, there is a tremendous amount of data that's going in that's trying to predict, based upon all these different scenarios, what is the most likely outcome. And coming up with that model requires a tremendous amount of human intelligence and processing power when it comes right down to it. And that's why even today, like I talked about, the cost of doing this it's really exponential as you move up this continuum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, to your point, I think of the more you get up there, with Hurricane Sandy having come through, I often think of the progression path for where a storm might land. And the further out you go, the more uncertainty there is. When somebody like a storm forecaster is looking at that, there are things that are relevant that they know that they will factor into it. And from a business perspective, I got to think it's the same thing. The need for the human intelligence and the understanding of the business and understanding of the metrics that are relevant to that business, its supply chain, its customers, are really critical to trying to get it right. There's so much out there, and to your point, with all the data that we're able to capture these days, the difficulty is in looking at it and saying what is relevant, what is not relevant, and making sure that we're not just taking the data at face value, doing the pirates to a global warming comparison and jumping off a cliff from it. The intelligence that you have in the organization needs to take the savvy look at what's there and say, here's what's important. Here are the factors that I think have a key play in it. Oh, here's some interesting stuff that we wouldn't have thought of. Let's take a look at that, and then tune that going forward. So, yeah, somebody once said to me many years ago, data is not a replacement for a working brain, and I think that's absolutely the case in spades with this. And it's very easy in this day and age, because we can get so much information, to have an unhealthy reliance on the data without factoring the human side into it. And certainly for moving forward and looking at trying to predict the future, that seems even more important.
Very well said. I agree.
Great. Okay, thanks. I guess we're just into the tail stretch here. So, folks, if there's any questions that you want to fire through to for Ray or myself, by all means, feel free to do so. Just into the home stretch here, we've been talking about the concepts around business intelligence, around trying to predict the future, around some of the best cases and some of the metrics and the practices, and a bit of a history lesson as to how we've gotten here from there as well. From our perspective, personally, I've been in the business process improvement, the implementation, the use of data and ERP systems to improve organizations for just over 30 years now. Working within TeamCain prior to that with J.D. Edwards, worked with an awful lot of organizations as they work to improve themselves using systems and using techniques. When we talk to, or when I talk to some of our customers, I've had conversations with a couple just in the last week and a half, and what we're looking to do always is find ways for them to be able to improve their organization, their lot in life, and their business going forward, certainly from a competitive advantage. I'm often asked, so how do you decide, Mike, for your organization? You represent a lot of things, you do a lot of things for your customers. how did you decide upon IQ for Business as an example of a solution to be able to represent? My comments are pretty straightforward. There's a lot of solutions that are out there. We're looking for things that are going to be class-leading as much as possible. Very specifically with Halo in particular and the IQ for Business solutions, we needed something that was an end-to-end solution for our customers. So soup to nuts, not something where you need one part for doing your ETL, another part to handle your data warehouse, and something else for the presentation side. We also ideally wanted something that was going to be device agnostic. As Ray showed, the 43% of people being mobile. That could be on a tablet at a Starbucks, that could be on a cell phone, it could be on a home computer, it could be on a laptop. People need to get to the data from a lot of different areas. History is replete as well with business intelligence solutions being slow and having low adoption. So what we liked about the solution from IQ for Business is a very rapid startup and also cost certainty from a licensing perspective, which is absolutely key. This day and age as well, there are very few organizations that are siloed with a single solution for their business needs. It is extremely common to have an organization running J.D. Edwards for core systems, financials, and distribution possibly, but they might have Manhattan in there for warehousing. They could have a shipping system in. They could be using PeopleSoft for payroll HR. You need something that will be able to pull the information together for all of those disparate systems, and in some cases might be an Access database, could be spreadsheets. What we liked about the Halo solution in IQ for Business is it's the one that allows that to be done. So just a little bit in terms of our process for looking at the solutions that are out there and how we decided upon it. For organizations that are looking for a solution, there is built into the Halo solution the human intelligence factor too. So typical process of going through and building for a business intelligence solution, you're saying, right, we need to have some insight into the sales estimates. Well, we need to then figure out, well, what does that mean? Well, we need to see them by region and rep. We need to then figure out what that means from a design side. Well, that's going to be calculated using the invoice, not the closed information. So what's the actual calculation process around it? We need to then develop it, what's it going to look like from a presentation side, and then align that, tie back in. All of this in the development of a BI solution that's going to work for an organization is key. What's nice from our perspective with the Halo solution is the ability to do that, and because of the social intelligence that's built into it, being able to capture that as part of the rapid implementation of it. Tying in with this as well, just for the interest of people that are on the webinar or might be recording this or watching this afterwards, there is the ability to do a proof of concept, and it can be very rapid proof of concept to deliver the goods, as we say, to get you to a solution that is going to be fit to task, give you the information that you need, and bypass the what I would refer to as the process of putting in a BI solution and turn it into a real project, and a quick one at that. So thanks, Ray. I think we can get on to the next one. We hope this has been helpful for everybody. Ray, I always greatly enjoy the opportunity to sit and listen to you share your expertise and knowledge from your background, not only with IQ for Biz and the great stuff that you're doing there, but also within industry and the background that you have in data and analytics. With that, we'd like to thank everybody for their time. Ray, thanks again for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
We'll be following up, and if any of you would like a link to the recording of this, we'd be happy to share.